before we launched with the bank, we did this very manual and hacked pilot
Okay.
where we issued manually debit cards in Stripe in the US. We then photoshopped them, sent them via email, and started with the first 50 clients. And we limited it to the first 50 clients because of regulation, right? That couldn't scale. We just said, fuck it, let's go and issue some cards with Stripe, Photoshop them, and start this. It was really, really funny and nice to do it.
Hello everyone, bonjour à tous. A new video, yes, in English. I want to continue to share stories of entrepreneurs around the world. We are still innovating a lot on this channel, so please continue to send me feedback. This interview is special for me. I met Salomon the first month when I moved to Colombia, back in 2021. He was looking for investors, and to be honest, I still regret to not invest inside the company. But it's over. I really want him on our channel for 3 reasons. First, I wanted to know why there is a bank for business unicorn almost everywhere in the world. Second, Salomon is an amazing guy. Why? Because he's fully transparent. You will see how honest he is about his fundraising, his MVP, his Stripe hike. Finally, I truly persist that it's my mission to bring more visibility to startups inside emerging markets. Before I let you enjoy the interview of Salomon, I want to tell you a little bit more about the business banking. Yes, you may know Qonto in France or Brex in the US, but have a look to this map. In every continent in the world, you can find a startup who is disrupting the business banking and who may raise a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money. Here is some of my favorites. Tide in the UK, Tribal Credit in Mexico, Jeeves or Mercury in the US, or the hundreds unicorn of India, Open Money. Do you understand how giant is this market? I love business banking because for me it's another illustration that fintech is eating the world, and you know how much passionate about fintech. So it's over about me. Stop talking. Let's jump on the story of Quentammono with Salomon, and you will see it's been recorded from a very nice WeWork in the center of Bogota.
So you are building a bank from scratch in a very difficult market in terms of competition. How did you start it? How did you meet your co-founders? How did you get from these frustrations that everyone have to take actions and build a company?
Okay, so I already told you the story when I started at a law firm, then the food company, and then I started working at a local fintech here in Colombia. During the first year, I did the regulatory issues of the company, and then for the second year, I moved to Mexico with Sebas. Sebas was back then my boss.
Okay.
He currently is my co-founder.
Okay.
And so in Mexico, we got to work hand to hand, like quite closely. Among the many things we had to do in Mexico, well, we had to open the bank account for this company in Mexico.
Okay.
We were foreigners, and the process took probably 4 weeks or so.
They beat Colombia, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was terrible. And the experience after we opened the bank account was even worse. And so it was back then that we started discussing, okay, there's already Nubank, RappiPay, Nequi in Colombia, doing retail banking quite well. There's nobody yet doing SME banking. There's a huge opportunity here. And that's how the idea of Mono was born. This was in 2019.
If I summarize, so a bank are not building features, they're just being a bank. And most of the fintech today are building the feature around the bank because the bank don't know how to do it himself, and maybe it's not the mission of the bank, but it's the mission of the fintech you are building.
Yeah, and for instance, people are in Bancolombia, like companies or like they have the highest market share because everybody has Bancolombia, right? So they have kind of like this closed ecosystem. So people are not in Bancolombia because they have features or because they are good, but actually because of the network that
Himself.
they have, yeah.
And to continue about the bank in Colombia, when I first came, I was really impressed by the bank himself in terms of two things. First, the technology of the payment method. I can send the money to the taxi driver to the restaurant in 1 second, and he arrives to his bank account with the technology of QR payment and account to account. When you open like the bank account, will not focus only on Bank Colombia, but most of the application in Colombia are quite well designed with a nice UX. So there is always this gap about the product look nice himself, but then at the same time the services is terrible and there is a lot of things missing. How do you explain like this gap into in some part is maybe the most advanced bank in the world, and in other part they compete with other terrible bank in the world?
Yeah, I think they've done a good job on at least UI of the apps. UX still super lagged. So it happened to me today that I was logging into the bank account, not the mono account, but other bank's account, and it just logged out, right? Which is like very, very frustrating. Customer service is pretty bad. So in order for you to speak with a representative, you have to like wait in the phone for, I don't know, 10, 15, 30 minutes. And then all the features that should be connected to the bank account aren't. So all the accounting, let's say, right?
And do you think the reason is, as you mentioned, the market share of the different banks here is because they are too big to innovate, or what's your personal opinion on that?
Yeah, so I think their heavy infrastructures impedes them to actually move faster because I think they want, and in some cases they've done like a magnificent job. Neki's example is one of those examples about the biggest bank in Colombia doing a terrific job on digital banking. But so infrastructure is one thing, and then the other one is I don't think they have the right incentives, right? They already have 80% of the market share between four banks. They already have it.
Yeah.
They don't need to innovate to get more and more. They already have it.
And have you been influenced by the competition abroad? Because I think in most of the country now there is a unicorn with a B2B payment. Some are more closer to the bank, others are more closer to the spend management. Have you been influenced by this success from Brex, for example, in the US, or Qonto in France? Yeah. How did you inspire from that? Did you look at it or not at all?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So the very first reference that we had back then was a company called Tide in the UK, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So that was like the starting point. But then we started looking at like benchmarking, and we currently have at least four reference, right? Mercury, Brex, Qonto, Conta Simples, and Cora in Brazil, still tied in the UK. So we kind of get ideas here and there from all of these players because I think, and we're in permanent contact with people from these companies that actually help us quite much, right? With a half an hour call with these guys, you can save 2 or 3 weeks of time and resources that at this stage are like super valuable.
And I can imagine like building a bank, as you mentioned, there is a lot of barrier at the entrance. What was the biggest barrier from these ideas back in Mexico to launching Monobank? What was the difficult step you have to face?
I always say that the two hardest things starting a company or building a company are getting started, right? Just making the decision and actually starting doing the very first things necessary to start the business. And the second one is dealing with people, right? That's very hard. Not just in the harsh situations, but also motivating people and just communicating with people in the day to day. So what I try to do is always be super mindful of how I speak, right? Even if the situation is good, bad, normal, I think that's probably one of the things I work the most on my day to day.
And because now in the US, you mentioned like Mercury Brakes, there is a lot of banking as a service companies. There is also very good in France like Swan.io. So there is people who allow you to build the features part and not building the bank part. How did you start it? Did you have a provider for Colombia or did you have to build yourself from zero?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently we're not a bank, right?
Yeah.
We operate on top of a bank, which is called Coop Central.
Okay.
These guys are probably the best, or the best and the first people doing banking as a service in Colombia. But back when we started, the infrastructure they had, at least for business accounts, was pretty precarious,
Yeah.
right? So we had to build and well, help them build all the infrastructure from scratch. And that's why we took a year and a half, I think, just launching.
Yeah.
So Mono, during a year and a half, was nothing else than product development and integration with Coop Central. Which was a huge challenge
Yeah. And for them as well.
for them as well.
Yeah.
But I think they're now uh, getting the results because everybody, every fintech that comes to the Colombian market, are looking for them because they're probably the most advanced in this matter nowadays.
And so from this first idea, from this first pitch deck sent at the beginning of the COVID to the first company onboarded, it took 1 year and a half.
So before we launched with the bank, we did this very manual and hacked pilot
Okay.
where we issued manually debit cards in Stripe in the US. We then photoshopped them, sent them via email, and started with the first 50 clients. And we limited it to the first 50 clients because of regulation, right? That couldn't scale. But so what we did was during the first year having this very small operation with these 50 clients. And so I think we had the first client in March 2021. So that was like 7 months after we first started,
Yeah.
right?
So tell
After
me-
the company started,
Yeah.
because we started sending the deck
it's always in the
March
mind,
2020.
but like it's
Yeah.
not official until you.
Yeah.
So tell me more. So you decided to say, okay, until we get the license and the way we can issue a real card, let's do with 15 people we know very well.
So I think two things. The first one was going out there and getting to know the market, right? You can do a lot of research and you can do whatever you want, but without clients actually using a product and or paying for it, you can't get the whole picture. So that was the first one. The second motivation was we were actually fundraising. And so we needed to show some traction and also that we were capable of starting a business even if it wasn't possible because we depended on the bank back then, right? And so that's what we did. We just said, fuck it, let's go and issue some cards with Stripe, Photoshop them and start this. It was really, really funny and nice to do it.
And if we jump back in the time, we are in September 2022. How is Mono today? How many customers? How many features? What is the company today?
Look, so we launched the first version of the product in December. So that's what, like 9 months ago, 8 months ago. That very first version was very basic. It was a bank account. The only way you could manage the bank account back then was through the debit card.
Yeah.
It was a virtual debit card, but that was the only way to move the money.
Yeah.
So but that was the first milestone, just launching the product.
But you can open the bank account fast.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Then the second milestone was evolving this very basic version of the product into a full bank account, right? Which is basically an account where money can flow freely both in and out, right? And that was what we were working on for the last 7 months,
Okay.
evolving into a full bank account. That's ready, right? And now for the next product development cycle, we're starting the third milestone, which is actually differentiating in the market, right? We already have what Bancolombia has, what Davivienda has. That's not enough, right? Because people will still trust more Bancolombia because it is Bancolombia, and we can fight with that. But what we can fight with is actually developing things faster that they don't have, right?
That's the only way to compete with like a company who control most of the market with the leader is by innovating, you think?
Yeah, and by listening to the users, right? A lot of them have been asking us for a US dollars bank account. They can't open it that easily with Bancolombia, and even if they open it, it's an account that is separated from the Colombian account, and they needed to have like centralized it, right? And that's what we're building in the next stage. An account in US dollars that can speak with the account in Colombian dollars. So you can receive payments in the US, keep the US dollars, which is completely relevant nowadays that the Colombian peso has been so volatile, and then send it to Colombia with just one click, just as Revolut does.
Today, if I'm a company and I incorporate in Colombia, how fast is it to open now a mono bank account?
So 15 minutes. It just takes you 15 minutes to fill in the form. Then there's a manual process on our side. It can take up to 1 hour or two, but that same day you have the bank account without going to a branch, without having to fill in like many documents. It's quite easy. We've put all the focus on just removing all the friction that currently companies have with incumbents opening a bank account.
You joined Y Combinator this winter, back in 2022.
Yeah.
Is it the first time you apply? How did you get it to Y Combinator?
No, we actually applied 3 times, but the first time it was when we had just launched this Stripe hacky pilot.
They didn't like it?
They did. They actually liked it quite much, but they say you still depend on the bank, on Cop Central. So please, as soon as you launch, apply again. We told them, okay, in 6 months we will be ready. 6 months passed, we were not ready. So once again they said, when you guys are ready, please apply again. The third time, we weren't even that much convinced on whether to apply or not. But we just did because we already had the application forms from before ready. So we just sent it. They called us to the call. We didn't even prepare it for the third interview. And back then we already had lunched with Cop Central. So they called us that night and we were in. But by the third time, we were already not giving a shit about it. But it was a very good process.
But you didn't resign, and I think if you didn't apply before, you maybe not get it by being ready.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, it was kind of like a pressure for us. So it's super frustrating when you get no's, not just from YC, from pretty much anything in life, right? But sometimes you have to see it as an opportunity that actually pushes you to do things better, faster.
How many no did you get since you launched Mono?
No, man, I can't tell. I mean, last time I was looking at my investors CRM. I've spoken with more than 200 investors
In 1 year?
in 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years.
And I think much more because back at the beginning I didn't even fill the CRM. So yeah, I would say it's 90% no's or more. So you have to learn to live with frustration, but actually shift it in your favor.
And you think that's a big difference between successful company and not successful company? Is people stop at the no and the other never stops?
I think there's a lot of factors,
Yeah.
but that's certainly one of them, right? But you also depend on the team, the timing, the market, maybe sometimes a little bit of luck. But I think grit is certainly one of the factors that pushes you towards, not just getting frustrated with the first no, but actually keep pushing. And having a team that can complement, because I mean, when I got a no, I always would go to my co-founders and tell them, but there's always one of them that's trying to push the feelings back.
There's always a positive guy in the room.
Yeah. So it's also learning how to lean on your team. That helps.
And you get accepted to Y Combinators. How much was valuable this third application, and how it changed the behavior of Mono today? I think one of the most evaluated company of Y Combinator today is Brex. I know they are very close to the Brex community and both each other. How did you learn from Y Combinator, and how impactful have been for you?
So what is struck my attention the most of YC is their focus on focus, right? Because back before we were accepted at YC, I thought YC was much more about getting investors on board, right?
Yeah.
And maybe talking a little bit of bullshit, even if it like if it
Having
wasn't.
the YC stamps on your
Yeah,
YC
yeah.
on the LinkedIn and being to the investors and having a lot of
Yeah,
making the fundraising easier.
but yeah, that's what I thought, and that's what I think many people think. But then what struck my attention the most was these guys, every meeting they did was, come on, build something people want, and for that you have to focus on the product and on speaking with the clients, right? If you have that, investors and money will come. If you don't have that, yeah, you can talk some bullshit and
Get
onboard
money.
some investors, but that won't last. So they're super focused on focusing on what matters, which is building an actual business. So
And-
and that I think gave us like strengthen our mentality towards that specific thing.
And you get prestigious investors out of your 200 list. I think you tick the box of maybe one of the most prestigious because you raised with Tiger Capital. How did you succeed to raise with Tiger Capital after being rejected by 200 others and investors?
Yeah, I think the key thing was that we launched in December, and then with a very basic product, we managed to get some traction very early on. And then that we were also evolving the product quite quickly. But to be honest, the investors I feel the most proud about is these people that with very, very small checks, I'm speaking about 5,000-10,000 checks, really have changed the course of the company. The people I told you about that have already been through this business model, that are people that you call with half an hour and they solve many problems that otherwise would have taken you 2 weeks, 3 weeks solving out. And that I feel the most proud about.
And today, how many customers do you have after these different two stage of the company?
So we're reaching 500 clients at this moment.
It's a lot.
Yeah, and that's without doing many efforts on growth, because as I said, the first milestone was launching. The second is building a full bank account, but we haven't built anything different, like very different to what the market has. Then the next stage is differentiating, which is when I believe growth will come massively. Before that, there's no sense on doing and spending too much money on growth, because the money you spend on growth, if your users churn, then it's money that is lost, right?
Or you just pay the impression, but nobody converts. So at the end,
That's right.
the money don't go back to the bank. But
So we're doing that, and even though it's not like a huge number of users, what is super positive on this client customer base is the retention. So we have just like a 5-6% monthly churn with a very basic product.
no,
Which
it's,
is the
it's, it's
fundamentals
quite
of-
impressive. But how did you get to 500 customers? Is it only word of mouth? Is it partnership? What's your secret challenge to get them?
So we've been doing a very good process in social media,
Okay,
which is led by Tommy actually.
okay.
And we've got like an important part of the clients from there. But there's also, we found out, there's another huge uh, client acquisition channel, which is referrals, right? We're not paying them a cent, and even though we're not paying them a cent, they're actually referring mono to other people, and this has been creating like a very small, but still uh, network effect among our clients, which is really positive because not only they're not churning, they actually are referring mono to other
Yeah.
friends.
Do you track it inside the product, or is mainly word of mouth, or people paying with a mono card into a restaurant? How do you succeed to track that?
No, it's manual.
Yeah.
So when they fill in the form, the last question is, how did you know about mono?
Yeah.
A friend, Google, LinkedIn.
That's the best way to track at the
Yeah.
end. And how do you anticipate to not becoming a big financial institution who cannot innovate anymore? It's still very early at the company, but it can be fast, and trust me, it can be very fast. How do you anticipate as a founders to really prevent and keep this DNA in the future to not becoming like the people who try to compete?
One of the things that Juanca, who used to work at Nubank,
The
has,
biggest bank in the world, neobank in the world.
yeah, it's actually bigest than many of the biggest incumbents in the world, and they still move really fast. They probably don't move as fast as they did back in the early days, but they still are way faster than any other bank, right? And what Juan has brought from Nubank is, I would say, this structure like in teams or in silos, right? That allows each team to be independent and self-sufficient, not just in terms that they have their own product, marketing, strategy, business, tech teams, but also that they can make their own decisions, right? So if you manage to implement this at a high level, decentralize it, then maybe you're able, for each team that is in charge of the bank account, of the lending vertical, of the FX, of the investments, etc., to make their own decisions, they maybe can move faster.
And today you are doing outside of the technical side things that banks are not doing in terms of being closer to the customer or in terms of routine. What do you have like unique that the bank would never do?
So at this moment, I would say that is customer service, right? So it's 100% manual. Well, there's an automatized flow at the beginning, but then you can speak with an agent within 1 minute. And one of the focuses that we've put to client service is making it human. And this might sound stupid, but the fact that you send emojis, clients feel it so warm that it actually makes a difference. And the way you speak, right? And that you laugh with the client. These small details that sound stupid, but that actually build relationships with them. That being said, we always, like, the very first priority of the customer service team is to solve, right? You solve and then you send the emoji. But first you have to solve. And if you have to do anything you have to do it. And then we'll figure out how. So for instance, it happened recently that a client tried to make a payment online with one of our cards. It got rejected. What we did was I actually pay with my personal card. It went through. We retrieved the money out of the client's bank account, and then we gave them another card. But what they needed in that moment was to pay. And that's what we did. It's not scalable probably, but the user actually feels this. And we've seen it on the reviews on social media, which is actually very gratificating.
Do you have other example of sacrifice that you did for a customer? This one is a very strong one.
Well, I think the pilot was,
The perfect.
yeah, it was us, mainly Tommy, manually by the end of the day. He had to go to Stripe and see all the transactions, and he would go on the Excel sheet manually
Crazy.
inputting one by one the balances and the movements that the clients did, and that was, yeah, it was nice. It was like a good season for Mono.
And do you think fintech can compete in terms of talents? Because I had the feeling like the biggest challenge at the end is to have the engineers to build the features. And my hypothesis is today the players like you, fintech player, succeed to hire better engineers than the bank himself.
Yeah.
Do you see it as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Two things. Engineers have seen this tech boom, and they've seen people making a lot of money with stock of the companies they work at. So the attraction, we have this advantage. We can provide stock options to our employees. We actually provide to every employee has stock options.
Is it common in Colombia or it's quite unique from
It's becoming common. Yeah.
Okay.
But banks can't do it,
Yeah.
right? Second, fortunately, we've like the ecosystem has received during the last 2 years a lot of money, so now we're in a position to pay probably like even to what banks pay. And third, motivation, man. I think this really moves people, right?
At the end, it's not a question of money.
Yeah, and we actually have people that have been offered much more money, but and we don't have to even raise their salaries. They are here because they love it. So we can compete with that. Banks, probably not.
No, I think that will be the biggest challenge in the future for big corporations is how do you attract and retain people, because I think the money will not be the only reason that you can have.
One of the things I feel the most proud about of Mono is none of our employees has ever resigned, right? The retention is 100%. And this, I think, is in part because of the purpose that the company has, which is very aligned to their purpose. And that, again, is something very difficult for an incumbent to, to transmit to their employees.
How do you manage, like when the first engineers or the first employee will leave? How do you really manage that? Is it too late to pick it up, or do you already think about it or not?
Yeah, I can't tell yet. I think it'll be hard. That day will come for sure. But I think the important thing is first that the relationship with that person is good, that they left because of external reasons and not because of Mono. And second, to always keep in mind this motivation thing that I think a lot on, that is that people are actually aligned with the purpose of the company.
If a guy left for a traditional bank, that would be a big failure on your side. If
Yeah.
he left to build a company, that would be a success.
Well, maybe that was a failure on the selection process, right? If they feel motivated enough to leave to a traditional bank, then yeah, we probably failed on that.
No, it's been a real pleasure, Salomon. I don't know if we will see each other next year again, and I'm sure you will build as many features, as many ideas. But I'm really impressed by how passionate you are, particularly in this type of product. Only the passions can make a success. And thanks a lot because you give us a lot of advice during these interviews. I think we all learn a lot. So I wanted to thank you for this interview and for taking the time to visiting us today.
No, Jeremy, thank you so much for the invite. I really like these spaces and share what I've been through, what the company has been through.